بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. So we're talking about arrogance and pride, and now the Sayyid, he brings some remedies for this in theory and practice. He says the practical remedy for the disease of pride is that man should contemplate on his creation, and he must think that he came from, something unclean, which is considered dirty by everyone. And then it's mentioned in Quran. So let man consider of what he is created. He is created from water pouring forth, something from najasa. So when he thinks about this, he remembers, like, why should I be so proud when my origin is from this? He shouldn't forget that he was born weak and helpless, and whatever strength he has given, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him that, because there was a time that we were helpless. And then eventually, if we live long enough, it will come a time again that we will be helpless and people will need to look after us. Um, Strength and power is limited. It is only given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah made us in a way that we have weaknesses. For example, we're hungry, we're thirsty, we get tired. These are all things to show us that we shouldn't be arrogant and we shouldn't be proud. Whereas Allah doesn't have any of these type of weaknesses. Man is in need of clothing, he is in need of shelter, he is in need of a lot of other things, or else he would be finished. He's prone to catch illnesses, he has calamities, he has disasters, and he has no control over those things. A weak being, such as us, such as mankind, should never consider themselves to be proud and arrogant. In Najib Balaga, in hadith number 454, Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, he says, "What has a man to do with vanity? His origin is semen and his end is a carcass, while he cannot feed himself nor ward off death." So Imam is telling us, look at our beginning and look at our end. And we're only here for a short time. Why should we consider ourselves to be so great when the one who is deserving of all praise and greatness is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Also, mankind carries within his own self dirty substances. He has to use the restroom, for example. He has to relieve himself. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hadn't hidden those things, their stench would have made life very difficult for him. We can see this, for example, those people who have to wear those, the bag, I don't know if you've ever been around something like that, but I remember some people had very bad, like, stab wounds, and they used to have this bag, and they had to, their feces would come into this bag. Even though it was in a bag, it's still unbearable to be around that smell. Yes. Colostomy bag, that's the name of it. He says it's written that when Ayaz became a close confidant of the king, his detractors began to try to pull him down from his position. And one day, two of the ministers came to the Sultan and said, Ayaz has stolen a lot of ornaments and treasure, and he has kept all of them in a room which he locked. Every morning he goes and visits that room and he doesn't let anyone else in there. So this worker of the king, they're accusing him of holding all of these things he has stolen in this room, and he just visits them and then leaves. So the Sultan got a doubt about it and said, when Ayaz comes to me tomorrow, you people, you go in there, open the door and bring whatever he has put in that room. So the next morning, these people took tools and they broke the lock, and then they went into that room, but they didn't find anything in there except a cotton sheet and a pair of leather slippers. So they thought that the treasure must be buried in the ground. Why would he need to visit that room every day if it only had a torn sheet and some old slippers? So they dug the floor of the room, but they didn't find anything. So they told the Sultan, and he he asked Ayaz that except for a sheet and a pair of slippers, there's nothing else in that room. So why did he keep the room locked and privately visit that room every day? Ayaz, he said to him, Before I became your servant, I had worn a particular shirt, but after joining your service, I got everything. Since man is prone to disobedience and he's prone to pride, I frequently visit that room and see my old clothes so that I may not fall into vanity. It's something to remember him of his origins, where he came from. He said, I should always remember that whatever I have is due to the favor of the king, and it is all given to me as a loan. And after that, I do this, I then go begin my day job. So a lot of people, when they get money, they forget where they came from. They forget there was a time when they had nothing and they had to work very hard for that. And they maybe become arrogant. They get some workers under them and they become like a tyrant. But they forget that at one time they had nothing. He says, indeed, there are countless weaknesses of man that don't allow him to reach his desires, such just as man desires to have knowledge about a lot of things, but it's not possible for him. We wish to attain knowledge about so many things, but we only, if we study our whole life, we only get just a drop from the ocean of knowledge. The more we learn, the more we study, the more we realize that we don't know, because more doors open, more possibilities open. The one who, has more knowledge, he sees more possibilities. And then it's harder for him to make the decision because so many different possibilities. Whereas the one who doesn't has knowledge, he either sees right or left, and that's it. And there's only two possibilities to do. But the more we learn, the more we realize that we don't know. He says he wants to remember something, but he forgets it. How many times have we tried to remember something and we can never remember that thing? It is something to show us that we are weak. He prefers to forget a particular sin, but he couldn't do it. Something that he did in his past, he wishes he could forget it, but he can't. He tries to concentrate on something and get rid of worries and doubts, but he cannot. He cannot succeed in that. And he is attracted towards those things in which there is destruction for him. And he dislikes those things that are good for him. All of these are weaknesses of mankind. And when we think and take time to contemplate on these things, we realize that we all have weaknesses. The problem is we don't take time to contemplate. Most of the time we are busy from one distraction to the next distraction to the next distraction. Our mind, especially in this time, is full of distractions. We have something to occupy our time every single moment of our life. We have we have our phone, which has countless apps on it. We have our TV, we have so many things, our family, our work, or every time we get a free moment, we are turning to look at something else. It's like this guy that was in the desert and he had one of those mawkib, like an Arba'in, and it was a tent where people used to go sleep. And as soon as he would go into the place, he asked the guy, what is the Wi-Fi code? And the guy laughed. He said, 20 years ago, people used to come in here and ask for the Qibla and you want to make salat or read Quran or something like that. But now we don't take time. We're too busy. And all of us fall victim to this thing. But we should use these devices that we have to do something useful with them. Apart from this, he is constant in dread of losing something, he says, which is precious to him, like his money or his family or his power and all of these things. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and they control not for themselves any harm or profit, and they control neither death or life, nor raising of the dead to life. Surah Furqan, ayat 3. So mankind, he is not in control. Maybe he thinks he's in control, but he's not in control. Mankind is a mortal who has no control over any of these, his capabilities. It's a fact that he is always in fear of death, and there's nothing that can save him from this death. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, every soul will taste death. Us realizing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is almighty and has power over all things, this in itself should humble us. He says the challenges a man faces during his life do not come to an end with death. After death, he will have to face justice. He will be interrogated about his major sins, his minor sins, and the details of his questioning, he says, are mentioned in the Quran and Ahadith. He says it's very likely that the people who occupy a high position from the worldly aspect will be degraded and lowly there, and the powerful people of this world will be utterly insignificant in the hereafter. Numerous beautiful faces will appear with bad appearance in that life, and they will be so terrible that he says the dogs and the pigs will be better than them because of the sins that they did in this dunya. No individual knows about the hereafter and the kind of end that is in store for him, whether he will be of one of the evil ones or he will be one of the righteous ones, whether he will be honored, whether he will be dishonored, whether his face will be shining with light or devoid of light. Whatever has been described about the circumstances of the people at that time are applicable to all of us. He says, whatever their areas of activity or circumstances on earth, if a person ponders over these things, then he will be convinced that it does not benefit a human being to commit sins and be proud or be arrogant. How can man claim greatness and importance when he is surrounded by all sort of uncertainties? Can there be a bigger farce than the claim of one's own greatness? He says, we want to do, if we were all powerful, we would be able to control our destinies. But we are full of uncertainties. We go to do something. We hope it works, but we don't know if it works. Maybe it succeeds, maybe it fails. It's full of doubts. It's a type of gamble. We don't know if it will be successful or not. We don't have control over these things. We only put some effort and we hope for the best. And for the believers, they rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make a way for them. I remember these people, I mentioned them in other classes. They were a branch off of the Nation of Islam, and they considered themselves as gods, gods of the universe. And they believe that they are Allah. And they said that it's something came from America, so they take a lot of things and twist them. For example, they say Allah means arm, leg, arm, head. So it means the body of the man. I studied some of their lessons before. They have a lot of lessons, and I learned a lot about them. But I used to debate with them in my younger years. They have schools in New York and these other things, and many of the music industry, they are members of this group. So they call themselves Nations of Gods and Earths, or 5%ers. So I remember they say they are God, but they are in jail, for example. And they say that the white man is the devil, and that he was grafted from the original man, which was the Asiatic black man, as they say. So I say, how come, if you are God and you are all powerful, how come the devil has you in a cage and lets you out and feeds you when he wants to feed you, or if he doesn't want to feed you, he doesn't feed you? How is the devil in control of God? It's so, simple to see, but some people are blinded by their deviant beliefs, but eventually what I've noticed is those people who are on that path, eventually, over time, maybe 10, 15, 20 years, when they get older, they accept that there is a God, and then they end up coming to the path of Islam. So he says some elders have given detailed cures for this pride and arrogance. They say that pride is a condition which is created when one keeps in sight those who are lower than him and ignores those who are higher than them. A person who has a slave is in a higher position than the slave. He is in command of the situation, and the slave cannot disobey him. The slave has to carry out the commands that he gives him. If such a person only thinks of his own superiority over the slave, then he will become proud. However, if the person realizes that with respect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, his own position is like that of a slave. Allah is the creator, al-Khaliq, and he is makhluk, he is the created one. Allah has full control over him, absolute control, and which he can never have over his own slave. This man, he cannot have full control over his own slave the way Allah has full control over us. So he has to be subservient to Allah and carry out his commands. With this idea in mind, a person is bound to become humble towards the creatures of Allah, very much like a person who is angry, and he not only speaks harshly to the person who has caused him this problem, but also with those who are not responsible for it. We have narration that says an angel came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and presented him two options. He said, the first option, you can become a king and a messenger. We look at king is so high, it's such a position, over all of the people, the ruler. Then the second, thing that the angel presented to Prophet was you could be a servant and a messenger. We normally look at servant as the lowest one and the king as the highest one. But Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam chose to be a servant. And a servant is even higher than being a king or a messenger. Don't we say in Tashahhud and our Salat, we bring servant first, and then we bring messenger? Don't we say, Ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh? So we say, we bear witness that he is his servant and his messenger. We bring servant first. So it shows what a great position to be Abdullah, or servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No one's justified in being proud or arrogant because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is supreme. He is the Almighty, Al-Aziz, Al-Qawi, Al-Jabbar, Al-Mutakabbir. All these attributes of Allah show his superiority over mankind. And Allah is not indebted to anyone. Except for Allah, it doesn't befit anyone to be proud for any reason whatsoever, even if they are the noble angels who carry the throne of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's also said that one who feels he is having the slightest worth, or he has arrogance before Allah, is actually considering himself to be superior. And Allah says in Surah Dukhan, ayat 19, and that do not exalt yourselves against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of the ways that we can do that is when we say, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says such and such law, such and such hukum, this ruling in Islam, but in this day and age, I don't really think so. I think, we've progressed and it can be, we don't need that anymore and it should be this way. Then who are we? We are challenging the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he has given us, that Rasulullah has given us, and we say that we know better. We are exalting ourselves against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whereas we should submit to Allah and have taslim, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Alim. He is the all-knowing. He knows what is good for us and what is good for us for all of time, which he has given us in Holy Quran. He didn't say it's good for that time and not good for other time. He sent this for all of time. Some special characteristics about the humility of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is that he never got angry with anyone for personal reasons. I remember one story about a man who cooked the iftar for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his servant, and he waited for Prophet to come, but it got late and he didn't come. Then all of a sudden he came with his guests, and Rasulullah looked and he noticed that there was no food there. So the servant got worried that he ate the food of the Prophet because he waited so long. He figured he ate with his guests. He ate at someone's house. He got an invitation and ate somewhere else. So he ate the food. And when Rasulullah came back with guests to eat, there was no food there. So when he asked Rasulullah if he was hungry, he said, "No, I'm not hungry." And he went to bed without eating. And he said that the servant said he never mentioned this incident to me ever. He never said anything bad to me. And even all the way until Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam died, he never mentioned that thing. This shows the mercy of Rasulullah, who is rahmatul alameen. So he never got angry with anyone for personal reasons. If that happened to us and we came home with some of our friends and the person at home who was supposed to cook didn't cook or they ate all the food, what would we do? We would probably be so angry, we would yell and fly off the handle and it would be very bad situation after fasting all day and coming home with no food. So we need to take the lesson from Rasulullah and be humble and not get angry with other people, and we should keep a calm and cool demeanor. He used to sit on the ground and eat. Most people who are kings or rulers, they are eating in this big chair that looks like a throne. Maybe they are eating with gold utensils, which is haram for us to do. But these kings and sultans, maybe they are eating with the best of the finest thing, where Rasulullah, he is eating on the ground with everyone else. It said that it often happened that a maid would come to fetch him for help needed by anyone anywhere. So people were always calling him for help. He would go help them whenever they needed it. He wouldn't say, "Don't bother me, leave me alone. I'm the prophet. I'm the ruler of the people. Go get someone else to do it." When they came to get him, he would go help them. Whenever he came home, he helped his family members, meaning he didn't come home and just sit down and not do anything like most of people are doing. They're coming home from work and they are just sitting down and they don't offer any sort of help. Yes, it's okay to come home and sit down and take a break, but when we see that we could help our spouse, we should help them in doing some things, even the gesture of doing something. Most of the time, we are not doing things right because we don't know how to do them. But the thought counts of trying to help. Maybe we can wash the dishes, maybe we can hang up the clothes, maybe we can, clean something. We can do something, even if it is small. We are helping out. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wa used to help out around the house. He says the causes of pride can be the possession of knowledge, wealth, goodness, beauty, physical power, position, status, and lineage. And he goes through these. He says any discerning person will realize that being proud of beauty or physical strength is foolish, because these can be easily lost with age, an accident, or disease. It is wisdom for a person to keep in mind his final fate, which is death, and consider of what use is beauty, physical strength, and elegance will eventually be to him. It will be nothing. So all of these things will fade away. Maybe someone is very pretty in their youth, then they become, 80, 90 years old. Their beauty has faded away from it. They're not the same as they were when they were younger. Maybe someone is strong and the strongest man, but he becomes old and his bones become frail and he cannot use them anymore. Maybe someone is proud because they look good, but then they get in an accident and they lose their beauty. Something happens to them. Maybe they are in a fire and they get burns or something like this, or they get a disease which causes them to lose a lot of weight and get very sickly. So pride over one's lineage is also senseless, he says. If it is worldly, it has no significance for the hereafter. And if it is truly spiritual, the ancestors could not have attained that superiority except by being humble towards Allah and His creatures. So if someone is proud just because they are Sayyid, but they don't do any of the things that earn them that position of honor, like making salat, fasting, making dua, giving sadaqah, doing good deeds for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, doing tabligh, all of these things, and they just said, "Oh, I'm a Sayyid," but they don't pray, they don't fast, they don't give sadaqah, they don't do anything. What use of that is that for them? It's no use for them. It will only benefit them, and it is a sign of honor when they are doing the things that their ancestors did, the Imams and Ahlul Bayt alayhi wasalam, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa how many of times I have parents of Sadat coming to me and telling me their children have become atheists. this lineage has not helped them if they don't follow in the path of their ancestors. When also you see other people who are not Sadat, they are not related to Rasulullah, and they are doing all of their wajibat. So it comes down to who is fulfilling their obligations and who is serving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So to be proud based solely on the lineage means nothing. The progeny, he says, the progeny that wishes to associate itself with the superiority of these ancestors can only do so by being humble to Allah and His creatures as exemplified by their ancestors. There is no question of being proud of this lineage whatsoever. An example of this type of arrogance, we'll end here, is I remember once a person told me, he said, no matter how much good I did, no matter how much I prayed and fasted all the days of my life, and he didn't pray and didn't fast and drank alcohol and so on and so forth, he said that he would still be better than me because he came from the land of Islam and his ancestors were all Muslims, whereas my ancestors were all Ahlul Kitab or something else. I mean, look at the arrogance and the pride based on just because his ancestors were Muslim, but he himself doesn't pray, doesn't fast, drinks alcohol, does zina, does all the haram you can think of, but yet the person based on their lineage, he says, I am better than the person who prays and fasts and does all of these things if they are a convert to Islam. And when we look at it in reality, we go back, everyone is a convert to Islam at some point in their lineage. They were not always Muslims. Their ancestors were something else before, and then they got in touch with Rasulullah, or either they found it later after the death of Rasulullah, and then they accepted Islam. Before that, what were the Arabs, for example? They were idol worshippers. Or we have people that perhaps their ancestors were, Hindus or idol worshippers or other groups. Who knows? At one point, if we go far back enough, it is like this from us. So we have to remember, this type of thing and be thankful that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guided us towards Islam and not use our lineage to say, oh, we are better than you. So there's no basis to be proud on lineage alone. It comes down to our actions, what we do with ourselves, what we do with our life in this dunya, and if it is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is it all comes down to taqwa and righteousness. So I think we have run out of time, and inshallah the next class, when we pick up on this, he talks about the person who is proud because of knowledge. So we'll end here. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Sheikh, I have a very quick question.